Hello 7th grade. Welcome to another video lecture by Mr. Ferris. Today our topic is going to be the nervous system. Now, the section for the nervous system starts on page 101 in your books, and you may wish to follow along in your books. There's some diagrams that might be helpful for you to look at as we go through this lesson. Please also be taking notes just as you would during class in your notebook or on a piece of paper that you can file away somewhere. And in this lesson in particular, there are going to be some things that I say that you will want to write down that you might not actually see written on the screen. So if there's anything I say that seems important, go ahead and jot that down and use your discretion. Of course, you don't have to jot down everything that I say. That'd be a bit overwhelming. If you remember back to our city analogy where we compared a living thing to a city, you remember that one of the comparisons that we made was that living things and cities both have kind of an information system. So especially in modern cities with all the technology that we have now, there is information and data that is sent back and forth in the city all the time. So somebody on the top of a building over here might be able to instantly gather information about what's happening in a building over here because they're connected through this complex system of wires and Wi-Fi and satellites and everything now. The nervous system works very similarly. We have data and information all around us. Our surroundings are filled with things that we can pick up data on. And the nervous system, basically, its job is to sense that data using our senses and to then respond to that data. So the nervous system enables us to sense and respond to things that are in our environment. So, along with the nervous system, we're going to be talking about several other systems, the sensory system, so sight, sound, all of those sorts of things we're going to be talking about in this lesson as well. And the reason they're included in this lesson is because they are so tightly connected to the nervous system that it's worth talking about them all at the same time. So, anytime that we sense something using one of our 5 senses, there's actually more than 5 senses, but we break it down into 5 main senses, we sense what is called a stimulus. Now, a stimulus is basically anything that you can sense. So it is a change in the environment that you react to. So it could be the sound of a bear roaring at you and then you run the other direction. Or it could be the sound of car horns as you're driving. Or it could be the smell of a bakery as you're walking down a city street. Anything like that. Something that you can pick up in the environment and then you could potentially respond to. That is what a stimulus is. And the plural of stimulus is stimuli, by the way, not stimuluses, stimuli. So let's go into the different sensory systems. The first sort of sense that we're going to talk about is sight. And what I'm going to do, and this is maybe a little bit different than the way your book puts it, is I'm going to talk about what the stimulus is for each of these senses. So the stimulus for sight is light. Your eyeballs are the organs that pick up light, and arguably this is one of the most important senses for us humans. We rely heavily on our sight all the time. If you can't smell, you can still function pretty normally in the world, but if you can't see, it's much harder to do all the things that you would typically do with sight. So there are several key parts of your eyeball that you're going to need to know. And I'll bring up a diagram here shortly. And I'm planning on putting a diagram, it would have been a worksheet that I would have handed out in class, on the RenWeb documents, so you can keep your eyes out for that as well. No pun intended. So the key parts of the eye are the cornea, the pupil, the lens, the retina, and the optic nerve. Now let me go ahead and bring up a diagram for you here. Now, the cornea is the outside of the eye. It's this kind of clear, rounded part that covers up everything. So that there is your cornea. The next part is the pupil. Now the pupil, we're all familiar with it. It's that dark spot in the middle of your eye, and it's actually a hole that light goes through to get inside your eye. So the pupil is right here. It is this hole that the light will travel through. Next we have our lens. The lens is actually, quite literally, a lens. It looks like a glasses lens. It is actually a concave lens. So when light passes through that lens there, it is going to bend the light as it goes through. Then we have our retina next. The retina is a layer of cells at the back of the eyeball. And that layer of cells back there actually detects light, and it sends signals then to your brain. And it sends signals along this nerve here at the back, and this nerve is called the optic nerve. Now, just so you know, the nervous system has to do with nerves. And nerves, you can kind of think of that as like wires in your body that send and receive information and electrical signals, which is really cool. They're fascinating. And we'll see maybe some pictures of them a little bit later. So let me show you what light does when it comes into your eye. So when, say there's a person over here, that can be your person. They can have legs and arms. So there's your person. Light bounces off that person, and that light goes toward your eye, and when it hits your cornea, it actually bends just a little bit, but it will really bend when it goes through the lens. So it has to travel through the pupil, and then it hits the lens. When it hits that lens, it actually causes the light to bend in such a way that when the light goes to the back of your eye and hits the retina, it's actually upside down. So if I look at this is light coming from the head of the person, this here is light coming from the feet of the person. This one will come through as well, hit the lens, and then bounce this way. So your brain actually has to flip the image upside down, so this person ends up being upside down here. So you can kind of get the idea, the head's down at the bottom. Any image that your brain sees is actually upside down, and you just have to flip it, and we're used to it, so it doesn't look weird to us. But it's just a fun fact. And I think your book on page 102 has a diagram of this as well, and it labels the different parts. So you have the cornea, which is that outside piece. Then you have your pupil, the little hole it goes through. Right behind the pupil you have your lens, which bends the light, and it focuses it right onto the retina, which are light-sensitive cells that pick up the signal, or the light, and then it makes a signal and sends that signal then to the brain through the optic nerve back here. So those are the parts of an eyeball. Next sense that we're going to talk about is hearing. Another very important one. Sight and hearing is how you're getting this video. Those are the two primary senses involved here. And the stimulus, of course, is sound. Now, sound travels in the form of sound waves. So if you look down here, this is kind of a visual representation of what sound waves are like. It'll look actually quite similar to waves in water, so like when you throw a pebble into the water and it makes that splash and the ripples go outwards. That's what happens when you make sound. So if I clap my hands, I'm making sound waves that then ripple out through the air and travel to your ears. Note that the shape of the ears is designed to kind of collect sound waves, which is pretty cool. So we're going to look at a diagram of the ear as well. And the key parts of the ear that we're going to talk about are the auditory canal, the eardrum, and then these three little bones called the hammer, anvil, and stirrup, and the cochlea. So let me go ahead and bring up the diagram here and show you what these parts are. So here is a diagram of the ear. Now, we're used to seeing just this part on the outside, but there's actually all the fun stuff happens on the inside of the ear, all of this complicated machinery down in here. So the outside of the ear, your earlobe, just kind of picks up the sound and puts it into the auditory canal. So the sound waves will travel through this auditory canal, and I'll even show little waves here coming in. The signal comes into the auditory canal, and it hits this little thing called the eardrum. Now the eardrum then will vibrate. So I don't know if you've ever been to, say, like something that has really loud speakers and you can feel things vibrating with the sound. That's actually kind of what's happening here. Is the sound will cause this little structure here to vibrate, the eardrum, and then the eardrum will send those vibration signals through these three little bones: the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. And I'm just going to put a little dot on each one of those. I'm not going to make you learn which one is which, but they're actually named after hammers, anvils, and stirrups based on what they look like. But again, you don't need to memorize their name, and they actually have more scientific names as well, which you also don't need to know. But they are the smallest bones in your body, which is pretty fun. These three little bones in your ear: the hammer, anvil, and stirrup. And what that does is that actually causes fluid in your inner ear to vibrate. and then we have this spiral seashell looking thing, and that is the cochlea. And your book doesn't go into all the details of how this works, but what happens is you actually have all of these little tiny hairs inside the cochlea that are different lengths, and they will actually resonate at different frequencies of vibration. So when a specific frequency of hair vibrates, that'll send a signal to your brain, and you will hear that pitch then. So that's how you hear different pitches, is based on which little hairs in here are vibrating inside the cochlea. So if just a little health note, you want to be careful about sticking things into your ear, like toothpicks or even like the little cotton swabs, because you don't want to get too far and damage this stuff in here. So if you clean out your ear, don't just jam in real hard. You could damage something in there. Also, if you listen to music that's too loud too often, you can actually damage some of the parts in the cochlea, and you will be unable to hear certain frequencies then. So it's actually interesting. You can find these tests online where older people tend to be less able to hear high-pitched sounds, so like really kind of squeaky sounding sounds. Young people can hear them just fine. It sounds like a really annoying mosquito, but old people have trouble hearing that. So maybe sometime while you're stuck at home, you can look up online one of those tests and see how high of a frequency you can hear. Alright, so that is hearing. Let's go back to our slideshow here. The next sense is going to be touch, one we're all very familiar with. And you may have learned a little bit of this when we talked about the integumentary system, when you took the notes from that last section, 3.3. Now, the stimulus for touch is kind of tricky to define because it's a lot of different things. So the stimulus is something like, it can be pressure, so if someone's like pressing on you, that is one of the stimulus. Temperature, if it gets warmer or colder. Pain, if you end up putting a nail through your finger or something that would hurt, and you're sensing that by touch. And then there's other things as well, like wetness even, sort of. So there's several different stimuli here, but they all kind of are in the category of touch. Now, you actually sense different kinds of touch, like these different stimuli. You actually sense them in different parts of your skin. So the epidermis, if you remember, is the outer layer of your skin, and that enables you to sense texture and temperature. And that really makes a lot of sense because you want your texture and temperature receptors to be on the outside. Imagine trying to feel temperature like through a blanket, or feel texture through a blanket. It kind of gets muffled and it takes a long time for the temperature to get through. So it's more instant and accurate feedback if it's in the epidermis. But for something like pressure, we can have our sensory receptors for pressure in the dermis, which is below the epidermis in the skin. So it's deeper in, and that makes sense because when you're pressing, you're actually pressing all the way kind of through the multiple layers of skin, so you feel it that way. So that is touch. And I don't have a diagram for you, but from your notes you should have a nice diagram of the different layers of skin and what they all do. Alright, next up is the smell. And I want you to think for a moment, what is the stimulus for smell going to be? You might think, oh, it's smell, it's odors. But what are odors? And interestingly enough, you might not think of it in these terms, but it is chemicals. So when you're smelling something, you're actually kind of identifying different chemicals that make up that object. There's little molecules that are released into the air, and those are like the smell particles, and they go into your nose. And inside your nose, you actually have these mucus-covered hair-like fibers kind of way up high in your nose, and different molecules will stick there, and it'll receive the signal and send a smell then to your brain. So it's kind of specific receptors for specific molecules enable you to smell different things. The smell system is often called olfactory system, so you can kind of see the word olfactory here. I'm not going to make you know that, but it might be good to know. You'll hear people talk about olfactory stuff. Or if nothing else, it's a fun word to bring up at the dinner table. It's like, oh, my olfactory senses are stimulated by your cooking, Mother. You can give a very nerdy compliment that way. Basically saying it smells nice. Okay, so that's smell. And connected to smell is taste. Now, taste is also, the stimulus is also chemicals. And that's why, like, when you smell something and you taste something, the smell and taste seem connected in your brain. So, like, if I smell pizza, I can kind of predict how it's going to taste. Or if I, smell some dish, I know what that taste is probably going to be like when I taste it. I at least have some idea. And that is because you're sensing the chemicals in both cases. So you have all these little taste buds on your tongue, these little buds, and these little dots, and they have about 100 cells that sense different chemicals in your food. And now what's fun about the tongue and the sense of taste is that actually different regions of your tongue taste different tastes. So you'll have 4 primary tastes that all tastes are made of. You have sweet, salty, sour, and bitter. And the different areas of your tongue will indicate like the different tastes. So I have a diagram of this as well. Give me a second to find it. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of see if I can color code the different regions of the tongue. This is like someone sticking out their tongue, except you see much farther back than you normally would. It's like they don't have the top part of their head. You can see right into their mouth at their tongue. Okay, so the sweet taste is right at the tip of the tongue. And I'm going to use red to show where this is. Like right there is where the sweet taste is. Red because it's like a cherry, and cherries are sweet. Now, salty tastes, I guess I'll use kind of this orangish brownish color because I like pretzels and they're kind of orangish brownish. Salty is also kind of at the front as well, but it goes a little bit wider than the sweet part does. So that's where your salty foods are, right there, when you taste them. Now, bitter foods, I don't know exactly what color to use, so I'll just use black. B for black and B for bitter. They're kind of in the back of your tongue, kind of back here in this region. That's where you taste those bitter foods. Like if you have, like say, some bitter tea or something, that you would taste it in the back of your tongue. And then your sour tastes, like if you have sour candy or a lemon or whatever, is kind of on the side of your tongue. So I'm going to use green because, I don't know, sour candy's often in green wrappers for whatever reason. Yeah, so that's where your sour tastes are. That's why, like when you bite into a lemon, you want to suck your cheeks and kind of cover up that part of your tongue where you're sensing the sour. At least that's why I think I do that. Yep, so those are the different regions of your tongue. You can taste different tastes on... You have different kinds of taste buds in the different regions. Okay, let's go back to our slideshow then. Now, we have gotten through all of the 5 main senses that people tend to think of. We went through sight, we went through hearing, we went through touch, smell, and taste. All of those pick up information and then they send it to our brain, and our brain decides what to do with that then. And it sends it along these structures called nerves. You remember that nervous tissue is one of the types of tissue we talked about at the beginning of the class. And pretty much everything in the central nervous system and in your peripheral nervous system, all that is nervous tissue. So your brain, your spinal cord, your nerves, and we'll talk about all those here shortly. But it's all nervous tissue. It's kind of sending information. It's almost like computer wires. So the central nervous system, this is like the central control of your body. It is made up of your brain and your spinal cord. So we all know where our brain is. It's in our head, inside the cranium there. But then the spinal cord actually goes down along your backbone. So it'll come down along here. And its job is it connects your brain to the rest of your body. And I believe I have individual slides for each of these. So your brain cells are called neurons. And I have a picture of them coming up. And actually there were neurons in the very opening slide of this slideshow as well. Your brain is made of about 100 million neurons that are just firing signals all the time. So lots and lots of information being sent around your brain. And different parts of your brain, just like your tongue, sort of, control different functions. And there's a diagram on page 105 in your books of this. And here's actually a little more detailed diagram right here. There's these different lobes and then different parts of your brain that control different either senses, like they receive different senses, like you have smell down here in the front, and or hearing and all that, or vision, or they can control different parts. So like you have your speech part, your motor control, so like moving your fingers and arms and everything. Different parts of the brain do different things. Now this is what neurons actually look like. They're actually cells, and they have these almost think like little arms that go out and touch other neurons. And so that you can see how it's like a big web of wires. So they can send signals along themselves and talk to each other. And your nerves work similarly. There's lots of long cells that send a signal, and once one cell gets a signal, it sends it to the next, and that one sends it to the next very, very quickly. And unfortunately, I can't go into all the detail of how those work, but you can think of it like a wire, and it's a pretty accurate way to think about it. Okay, The other part of the central nervous system, along with the brain, is the spinal cord. And like I said, it's found inside the spine, and it connects your brain to the rest of your body. So your brain wants to talk to all the nerves throughout your body, and that spinal cord that goes right down your spine actually connects at several main points to all the different nerves. So it's kind of like a highway where it has several different exits where you can get off and then go on the smaller roads. So it's like one main column of nerve tissue that then branches off, and you can get to the smaller nerves outside of it. Okay, yeah, so we talked about the central nervous system. Now here is the peripheral nervous system. So it's almost similar to axial and appendicular skeleton is the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So when you think about your peripheral vision, that's everything on your side. So like right here, I can see my hands still, but I'm not really looking at them, and they're right next to my head, kind of like that. And so peripheral is kind of like means it's like kind of on the side, on the outside. And so the central nervous system is in the center, and the peripheral nervous system is everything else that's on the outside. So the peripheral nervous system is basically everything that is not your central nervous system. So the nerves found everywhere else throughout your body. So in this diagram over here, you can see you have your brain and spinal cord, which are the central nervous system, and then all these other nerves going throughout your body that are gathering and sending data, information. And that is the peripheral nervous system. Now there are different kinds of nerves that you have. You have sensory nerves, and you also have motor nerves. Sensory nerves have the word sense in their name, and their job is to actually pick up information from the outside world and send that to your brain. So they are connected to your senses. Now motor nerves, when you think motor is like something that's moving, motor nerves are nerves that connect your brain to, say, your muscles or things that can move in you. And so those carry the signals that are like telling my finger to move, is going along motor nerves. And then the sound that I'm hearing right now is going through sensory nerves, or like what I'm feeling, I should say, is when I touch my hand is going through sensory nerves. Now, just like when we were talking about muscles, you have kind of automatic versus voluntary muscle actions. It's the same thing with nerves. You have voluntary portion of your nervous system, and you have an automatic portion of your nervous system. The automatic portion is the part that you don't have to think about. So like your heart continues to pump on its own, and your brain is actually controlling the heart rate. You don't have to think about sending that signal to your heart. Your smooth muscles, so in your digestive system, along your intestines and stomach and everything, your brain is just controlling that without you having to think about it. And even balance, so you can stand upright without having to think about your balance too much. Now, sometimes the more complicated things, like if you're on a balance beam, you might have to put a little more brain power towards your balancing. But for the most part, we don't have to think about it. Another automatic nervous system component is the fight or flight response. Now, this is what happens when your body senses it's in some sort of immediate danger or a very serious situation, and it has to decide what to do. And its goal is to basically prepare your body to either fight whatever it is that's about to hurt you, or to run away, to fly away, flight. So the fight or flight response is like, imagine you're walking through the woods and then suddenly you come across a bear, and the bear is coming at you. You feel your heart drop, your heart starts racing, adrenaline starts getting pumped, and you're ready to either try and beat up the bear as best you can, or run away. You just get this surge of energy ready for that. And that's called the fight or flight response, part of your automatic nervous system. Now there's also the voluntary nervous system, and that is stuff that you can control on your own. So moving my hand right now, that's my voluntary nervous system, because I'm volunteering it to do that. I'm choosing for it to happen. So moving your arms, moving your hands, moving anything is your voluntary. So that is the end of the notes here. I hope that you enjoyed it. There's some pretty cool pictures in here, I think. I have one more diagram to show you, and that is basically what we were just talking about, and that is the kind of the different parts of the nervous system. I'm just going to show you this here with some color. So the central nervous system, I'm going to use purple to indicate. So purple is going to be the color of the brain here. And then you have your spinal cord. It comes down all the way along your spine. And that is your central nervous system. Everything else here, I'll make it in a bluish color, is the peripheral nervous system. So this spinal cord connects to nerves. So here it's connecting to nerves that are going along the arms. Here it might be connecting to nerves going into your torso. Here going down into your legs. So it connects at all of these different points, and those different points are kind of like the exits of the highway. So the blue here is the peripheral nervous system. The purple is the central nervous system. I just wanted to show you how that is done. And again, all these diagrams can be found in a document that I will upload to RenWeb. And if you would like to print it off and keep it in your notes, you're welcome to. Or if you'd like to just look at it or save the file, you're welcome to. But you're not required to do anything with it. It might be a good idea to at least study them so you know where the different parts of these organs are, so like where the retina is in the eye. And these diagrams are also found in your book in this section, so be sure to utilize that resource as well. Well, that is all that I have right now. Congratulations on making it through your first week of virtual school, your first full week anyways of virtual life science. Hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.